coronavirus pandemic as a Cuban medical brigade landed in South Africa to assist its efforts against COVID-19. The Chinese city of Wuhan no longer has any hospitalized COVID-19 patients. Across Africa, people are finding local solutions using the resources at hand to the global challenge of the coronavirus pandemic. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Katrina Goss. Over 200 Cuban health personnel landed in South Africa early this Monday to assist the country in its fight against COVID-19. They were welcomed by various cabinet ministers, the Cuban ambassador to South Africa, and Cuban residents in the country. The medical brigade includes family physicians, epidemiologists, biologists, healthcare technology, engineering and biotechnology experts, and other specialists. This team will undergo a precautionary quarantine for the next 14 days. They will use this time to gain an understanding of the current situation in South Africa and the provinces they will be deployed to. Cuba has sent 22 medical brigades to 4 continents as part of the response to the coronavirus pandemic. According to the Johns Hopkins University, South Africa has reported over 4,000 COVID-19 cases and 87 deaths.
We thank each and every one of the Cuban health professionals who are part of this team for their personal commitment and sacrifice in order to assist South Africa's efforts to curb COVID-19.
Y tomamos esta oportunidad. Queridos compañeros.
Dear comrades, on behalf of the Cuban collective in South Africa, we warmly welcome you to the beautiful land of Mandela. We are very proud of you, our best soldiers, the soldiers of the army in white coats, who were created by our commander-in-chief Fidel Castro.
Venezuelan Vice President for Communications, Jorge Rodriguez, presented a daily update on the coronavirus situation in the country this Monday. He stressed that Venezuela has one of the highest rates of recovered patients in the world. He also reported that 4 new COVID-19 cases were identified for a total of 329.
Para el día de hoy, 27 de abril del año 2020.
Today, April 27, 2020, we have registered 4 new cases. New people infected by COVID-19. In the last 24 hours, 2 males and 2 females.
President of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, authorized the use of lethal force by police and troops against gang members on Sunday in a bid to crack down on violence amid the coronavirus pandemic. The Central American country reported 24 homicides last Friday, the worst one-day toll since Bukele took office in June. By late afternoon on Sunday, police had registered another 29 murders, prompting Bukele to introduce tougher measures against gang violence. The president tweeted his concern that gangs were taking advantage of the pandemic to control the streets. The imprisoned members of rival gangs were also put into mixed cells this weekend, ending a separation measure that had been enforced for years. The 20 poorest districts of the Brazilian city of Sao Paulo have seen a 45% increase in the COVID-19 death toll in just a week. Former Minister of Health, Arthur Choro, described these figures as extremely concerning as they reveal the vulnerability of the population and the seriousness of the health crisis in the country. The number of COVID-19 fatalities reported in these districts rose from 474 to almost 680 in recent days. Meanwhile, in the richest districts, the death toll increased from 263 to almost 360, representing a rise of 38%. Health authorities in Honduras confirmed that the curfew had been extended until May 3rd on Sunday in order to stop the spread of the novel coronavirus. This is the 6th extension of the curfew in the Central American country, which has recorded over 660 coronavirus cases and 61 deaths. Meanwhile, the president of Ecuador, Lenin Moreno, announced that as of May 4th, measures to address the COVID-19 epidemic will be in the hands of local mayors as part of a strategy for the gradual lifting of the lockdown in the country. As of Sunday, Ecuador had officially reported 22,700 positive cases and 576 deaths, although the figures are widely expected to fall far short from the reality. Likewise, Paraguay's President Mario Abdo Benitez announced on Monday that schools will be closed until December. Paraguay has reported 228 confirmed cases and 9 fatalities. Meanwhile, Colombia began its gradual return to normal economic and productive activity on Monday. The move has received widespread criticism as it means thousands of workers could be exposed to the novel coronavirus. Colombia has not yet passed the critical phase of the pandemic. Meanwhile, Bolivian de facto authorities are implementing a total lockdown and the isolation of those who had contact with confirmed cases, as well as other measures recommended by the World Health Organization. As of Monday, Bolivia has reported a total of 950 COVID-19 cases and 50 fatalities. The number of confirmed COVID-19 cases and fatalities continues to rise in the Caribbean. The Dominican Republic is one of the most affected countries, with more than 6,000 confirmed cases and almost 300 deaths. It is followed by Cuba with more than 1,000 positive cases and 56 fatalities. Meanwhile, Jamaica has reported a total of 350 cases and 7 deaths. They're followed by the Bahamas, Barbados and Haiti as the Caribbean nations with the largest number of cases. More stories coming up after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, which has cost over 210,000 lives worldwide, the US President and his French counterpart agreed on the need for reform of the World Health Organization. According to the White House, Presidents Donald Trump and Emmanuel Macron spoke by phone on Sunday. The two discussed the fight against the coronavirus pandemic and progress towards reopening the world's economies. They also spoke in favour of holding a meeting of the permanent members of the UN Security Council as soon as possible to discuss the pandemic. The talks came after Trump cut off US funding to the WHO, a decision that was condemned by France. As of Monday, the United States has reported over 1 million COVID-19 cases and more than 56,000 fatalities, while France has registered more than 165,000 positive cases and over 23,000 deaths. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the United Kingdom has reached a moment of maximum risk in the coronavirus outbreak, arguing that lifting the nationwide lockdown too soon could lead to a second spike in cases. Johnson's Conservative government has faced widespread criticism for its mishandling of the epidemic, including failing to protect essential workers.
And we collectively flattened the peak. And so when we're sure that this first phase is over, and that we're meeting our 5 tests, deaths falling, NHS protected, rate of infection down, really sorting out the challenges of testing and PPE, avoiding a second peak, then that will be the time to move on to the second phase, in which we continue to suppress the disease and keep the reproduction rate, the R rate, down, but begin gradually to refine the economic and social restrictions.
The hearings in the US extradition case against WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange have been postponed due to the coronavirus lockdown. On Monday, Judge Vanessa Baritza adjourned the case until May 4th, when a new date will be set. Assange lawyers have noted that the COVID-19 lockdown in prisons makes it impossible for them to meet with their client. Lawyer Edward Fitzgerald told the judge his legal team had been unable to speak to Assange for a month, but a few short phone calls. Spain began easing some lockdown restrictions on Sunday, allowing children to play outside for the first time in 6 weeks. The country has seen the third highest number of COVID-19 deaths in the world and the second highest number of cases, but the numbers are falling.
We have, unfortunately, as usual, 331 new deaths. We have already seen several days below 300. It is always a sad, but of course the evolution has an effect or has a clear comparability with the evolution in new cases that is clearly downward and that obviously gives us hope.
obviamente nos va dando esperanza.
People across Germany are now required to wear face masks or some other form of facial covering on all public transport. The federal and state governments agreed last week to urgently recommend that people wear masks or some other covering on public transport and in shops. However, they are only mandatory in shops in some states. The 16 state governments of Germany are ultimately responsible for imposing and loosening lockdown measures. Germany has now reported over 158,000 COVID-19 cases, but a comparatively low death toll of just over 6,000. New Zealand reported 5 new coronavirus cases on Monday as the country prepared to ease the strict lockdown at midnight. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said there hasn't been widespread community transmission of the virus and the country has so far managed to avoid the worst scenario.
Of course, the ambition we all have is to confidently reach the position where we can bring back the social contact that we all miss. But to do it confidently, we need to move slowly and we need to move cautiously. We must make sure that we do not let the virus run away on us again and cause a new wave of cases and deaths. To succeed, we must hunt down the last few cases of the virus. This is like looking for a needle in a haystack, and we need your help to finish the job we have started.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe announced on Monday that his country was adding 14 more nations to its entry ban list amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Japan has already banned entry to people travelling from more than 70 countries and foreigners with records of visiting those countries in the past 2 weeks.
14 countries such as Russia, Peru and Saudi Arabia, which are countries whose infection disease risk information was raised to level 3 with travel suspension recommendations last week on the 24th of April, will be added to the areas subject to entry refusal under the immigration laws and will be effective from midnight on the 29th of April.
The last 12 hospitalized COVID-19 patients in Wuhan, the city at the center of China's COVID-19 outbreak, have now been discharged. The Hubei Province Health Commission reported the news on Monday, noting that all remaining patients in the province were located in Wuhan, the provincial capital where the coronavirus took the heaviest toll in China. Hubei has no more suspected cases in its hospitals, though 1,700 people who had close contact with infected people remain under medical observation. Meanwhile, Chinese scientists reported on Monday that they now have 3 possible COVID-19 vaccines in the clinical trial stage, but warned that vaccine development was complicated and that they would welcome global cooperation.
China has already supported the research of 5 vaccines, including adenovirus vector vaccines, inactivator vaccines, nucleic acid vaccine, and so on. Now all the vaccines are being developed steadily. The one that has made fast progress is the adenovirus vector vaccine developed by Mrs. Chen Wei. It was the first to go through phase 1 of clinical trials, and now it's in phase 2 trials. Now there's another one, Sinopharm's inactivator vaccine in Wuhan, which has started phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials. There's also a third developed by Sinovac. So that means China now has 3 vaccines in total now in clinical trials.
And we're taking one last break now, but stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. The number of COVID-19 cases and fatalities continues to rise across the African continent. According to the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the number of deaths across Africa reached 1,423, where almost 32,000 cases have been reported. Egypt remains the country with the most confirmed cases so far at 4,782, while it has seen over 300 deaths. South Africa ranks second with 4,546 cases and 87 fatalities. They're followed by Morocco with over 4,000 confirmed cases and 162 fatalities. Malaria continues to be the main cause of death in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, with more than 13,000 fatalities registered in 2019. According to a report issued on Saturday by the NGO Doctors Without Borders to mark World Malaria Day, children under 5 years of age are the most affected by malaria in the country. The report added that rural areas have been hit hardest due to insecurity and the difficulties in accessing healthcare. In 2019, Doctors Without Borders treated more than 750,000 malaria patients throughout the country. In this context, the Congo now faces the coronavirus outbreak, with 459 positive cases reported so far and 28 fatalities. Burundi's political parties started campaigning for next month's presidential elections on Monday, despite the global coronavirus crisis. With only 1 death and 11 COVID-19 cases reported in the country, which has conducted minimal testing, authorities are pressing on with the May 20th vote for a successor to President Pierre Nkurunziza, who has been in power since 2005. Unlike most other nations, Burundi has not put restrictions on gatherings or internal travel due to the coronavirus crisis, so campaigning should be relatively unimpeded. Guinea crossed the symbolic mark of 1,000 coronavirus cases on Sunday, according to health authorities. The virus is spreading rapidly in the country despite the introduction of a curfew and compulsory mask wearing. The National Health Security Agency announced a figure on Twitter, reporting that 225 people have recovered from the virus. Guinea's death toll exceeds that of neighbouring countries such as Senegal and Mali, despite the closure of schools, borders and places of worship, as well as restrictions on gatherings. Guinea has already been severely tested by the Ebola virus, which killed more than 2,000 people between the end of 2013 and 2016. Across Africa, people are finding local solutions to the global challenge of the coronavirus pandemic. From technological innovation to community collaboration, ordinary people are using the resources at hand to address the unprecedented challenges they face. More in the following story.
In Senegal, 3D printers are being used to compensate for a lack of medical equipment in health centers. A local technology group has mobilized 3D printers in small workshops throughout the country to make plastic visors for healthcare workers. In Dakar, workshops print and assemble dozens of masks every day before delivering them free of charge to hospitals, pharmacies and clinics.
We saw that there were a lot of initiatives in other countries in relation to equipping doctors. In Senegal, we have a problem regarding equipment and resources. We had a 3D printer, so we started manufacturing because we could help.
Similarly, in Liberia's capital, Monrovia, residents are taking matters into their own hands by setting up neighborhood checkpoints to screen the temperature of those who enter and wash their hands, a strategy already used in the Ebola outbreak a few years ago.
Liberians are still doubting that the sickness is not in the country. That's all they believe. So when they saw the guys putting those gates and things down, telling people to wash their hands, having the instrument testing and taking the temperatures and things, some try to get the eye that indeed it is true.
Meanwhile, health workers and doctors in Malawi are refusing to work until the government provides them with personal protective equipment and better pay in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. At Kamuzu Central Hospital in the capital, Lilongwe, many patients were forced to return home as there was nobody to attend to them. In Uganda, Kampala city authorities are providing shelter to street children during the nationwide lockdown. 180 of them, or the most vulnerable, are being housed in primary school.
When the lockdown happened, we had children that live and work on the street, and when the directive to stay at home was made, they did not have a home to go to because their home is on the street.
Local music has got a continental twist as well. The United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, has released a new version of Minas Makiva's hit, Pata Pata, performed by Benin's Angelique Kidjo. The tune remains the same in what once was called the world's most defiantly joyful song, but the words have a viral twist. The song has particular resonance for Kidjo, whose friend Afro-jazz icon Manu Dibanjo died earlier this month from the coronavirus.
This is what we gotta do, Papa. We need to keep our hands clean.
The Palestine Liberation Organization this Sunday made a call for collective international action against Israeli plans to annex parts of the occupied West Bank. Hanan Ashrawi, a member of the PLO's executive committee, stated that the Palestinian leadership welcomes important statements made by many states and regional organizations rejecting Israeli plans for the annexation of Palestinian territory as illegal and unacceptable. She stressed that Israeli actions are undermining the possibility of a two-state solution as Israel continues to grab Palestinian land, expand settlements, and undermine the viability of the Palestinian state at the financial, political, and practical levels by taking willful steps to bankrupt the Palestinian government and financially extort the Palestinian leadership. All this with the blind ideological support it has in the White House. Ashrawi called on the international community to act to stop Israel from dealing the final fatal blow to the chance of peace. The conflict in Afghanistan has left more than 500 civilians dead, including 100 children, in the first quarter of this year. According to the UN mission in the country, the figure demonstrates the persistence of violence despite attempts to reduce fighting between the government and the Taliban. A mission report documented a total of more than 1,000 civilians killed in clashes between January and March. There was also an escalation of violence in March, a period in which the Afghan government and the Taliban were expected to start peace talks after the signing of a historic agreement on February 29th between the insurgents and the United States, which included the withdrawal of foreign troops within 14 months. Three civilians were killed in an Israeli missile attack near Syria's capital Damascus on Monday. The Syrian Air Defense Force intercepted several missiles fired during an Israeli airstrike against targets near the capital, according to the official Sana news agency. The Israeli attack was carried out from Lebanese airspace and also left 4 civilians injured, including a 6-year-old boy, as well as causing considerable material damage to the homes of displaced families in the Syrian province of Quneitra. The strike came in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic and at the start of the Islamic sacred month of Ramadan. To mark International Dance Day this April 29th, the director of the National Ballet of Cuba, prima ballerina Virgencia Valdés, has proposed to dedicate this year's celebrations to Cuban prima ballerina absoluta Alicia Alonso as one of the most representative figures of dance in the Americas.
Bailarines, coreógrafos, maîtres,
Dancers, choreographers, maîtres, musicians, and everyone who makes possible that our art reaches you, let's remember the figure who catapulted our country into the dance world map. This year, the Council of Europe, the International Theatre Institute, at the request of the Cuban delegation to UNESCO, dedicated such an important date to our beloved Alicia. Let's continue to celebrate this great anniversary. Let's join together in this great dance party and let's remember her creative work.
And we've come to the end of this news brief, but we finish with images of world-famous Cuban ballerina Alicia Alonso. Remember, you can get all the latest news by following us on social media as well as on our website. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.